to This is Whole Life, a podcast from the WholeLife Church in Orlando, Florida.
Join me, Ken Wetmore, lead pastor, and Melanie Bachman, our worship pastor, along with our communication team, Randy and Lucas. Take a look back, a look deeper, and a peek into the week ahead.
Here we explore meaningful conversations about spirituality, community, and living with purpose.
We don't have all the answers, but we are walking the journey together.
Wherever you're listening from, you're wanted here.
This is WholeLife.
Hey everyone, it's episode 512 of This is Whole Life, where as always, we're digging deeper into each message each week here at the WholeLife Church in Orlando. It's a year of greater things, and this week it was finding comfort in lament. And you guys came up and you answered the bell, you took the challenge. And because we know every week I tell you, conversation only lacks one thing, and that's you. And a whole bunch of you reached out and asked questions, thinking about the message. And what really surprised me was how many we had when we only had one service to work with, because one of our streaming partners was down on their website, and a couple of you caught the message on the home screen if you refreshed and was like, oh, hey, I can get in, but there was no chat after about the first couple of minutes of the service. So if you did have a question, you still have time to send it in. We'll get to it next week if we need to. Podcast at wholelife.church or voicemail or text 407-965-1607. And this week I am super happy to announce that we have something from our Slack channel, we have something from the text message, and we have a voicemail.
Oh, it's the hat trick.
It's the hat trick.
Wow.
I'm like, come on, this is exquisite.
I don't even know if I can continue on.
All right. I
feel like I'm going to walk out. That is,
he's like,
I don't even need to be here
No.
if we're going to get that kind of involvement.
Yeah, on one service.
Wow.
But I think the key, like this week, just like during first service, which I can see in the chat from first service.
So the key is to make sure that one of our services doesn't broadcast.
I guess, yeah. It doesn't do much for the reaching that second service crowd, which is usually our largest. Although I would say our online, in the first service, online is the larger crowd.
Yeah.
So
can I just say though, I pay attention to the numbers you put into our into our database there, and our numbers for online views have been going up.
Yeah, we've had some big weeks. We were almost 900 a couple of weeks ago. That was crazy. Yeah. But this week we had members, we had guests, and we had online folk that were watching from Oregon, Blakely, Georgia, the UK, and Barbados. So
which one of those places would you like to be in? Like if you had to pick between all those places, which one would you want to be watching from?
Right now? Probably, you know what? I would probably pick the UK just because I've never been to Europe.
Yeah, that would be good.
I mean, Barbados, I've never been to Barbados either, but I feel like if you've been to Florida, if you've been to the Dominican.
I think all the people in Barbados are just I think they're about to let you know why you don't understand
why I should be there.
Yeah, well, how it's not the same.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. But, I mean, just in...
But you'd like to go to merry old England, huh?
Yeah, I think it'd be fun. UK. I've never been there.
Well, so what were the places again? UK.
Oregon. Blakely, Georgia.
Blakely, Georgia.
UK and Barbados.
Blakely, Georgia, clearly.
I don't know where Blakely is.
I'm kidding.
Exactly.
Clearly.
Clearly, I don't know where Blakely is. I didn't look it up on the map, but
it's it's right there.
Yeah.
Randy, right there on the map.
I mean, I can't wait till we start doing this video podcast, because then people will be like, it was almost like E.T. phone home. So just a moment here in the studio. But anyway, so as always, as you've already heard the voices, Ken, Melanie, Lucas, and myself, we're all here again this week, which is always good. And if you haven't heard the message, if you swipe up in today's show notes, you'll find Speaking of Grace, Finding Comfort in Lament, and you'll find that as the most recent episode in that feed. So, no emails this week. Okay.
Oh.
I know, but...
Okay, I can stay now because we hit 3 things, but we didn't get... How do we receive no emails? That's not true.
Did we get an email? Who got an email?
I thought... Wasn't Mariana's...
No, hers is a text.
Oh.
Yeah, so...
Okay.
Ken's divulging secrets. You want to start with that one?
No, I'm not saying we need to do that. I thought that...
Yeah, no, that was a text. She is a text person.
Are we allowed to use names, or did I just give everything
Mariana
away?
gave us, just because Ken is awesome and Ken Rate, you guys had to know. You just had to know. So being that that's in the Slack channel, I had like 4 people join the Slack channel over the last, since we announced that. And one of those people were Roxana. So Roxana, I'm going to read her message to us in Slack, which
Nice.
that you don't know, Roxana, you don't know how happy this makes me that there are people having conversations in Slack. So if you're there, we don't typically bring the conversations from Slack that are just like, hey, you mentioned this, whatever. Sometimes we don't bring those in because they're just kind of conversations that happen there. And Randy, thank you for the conversation that you and I had here over the last week. And so, that's just another reason that we don't have time to go through all of them, but it is another way for you to connect in another community. So from Roxana, hi all, I've been listening to WholeLife since late last year, and it's literally been an answer to prayer. I could write an entire novel, but I will refrain from doing so and write a novella instead. I listen to WholeLife, sermons, and podcasts on my hour-plus work commute, and not always caught up. I know the feeling. 2 days ago, my podcast feed, mercy. 2 days ago, I listened to Endgame and found myself tearful and contemplative by the time I arrived at work. What brought me to WholeLife originally, long story, I'm an Orlando native but now moved out of state, was that all the churches around me seemed to have this obsession with end-time events, and I found myself wondering if Adventism continued to be for me, if this is all it had to offer. Tell me of God's love, of characters of the Bible, and how to better hold grace in my heart. Not this obsession with timelines or Satan's nefarious machinations or other fear-inducing strategies. I prayed a what now prayer, and God reminded me of WholeLife, which, with the first sermon I heard, I knew would be a balm for my soul. Thank you for the best end-of-time event sermon I've ever heard that has made me think. It completely resonated with me. An additional answer to prayer, my getting burnt out working in healthcare and praying to God for help. I work in Appalachia and there's a lot of healthcare need and not enough personnel. Drug-seeking behavior prevails, medicine, illiteracy. Endgame shifted my thinking to re-see it as, Lord, I am healing and helping your least of these. Give me the mental and physical strength to continue. Thank you, WholeLife, for your sermons and productions. Roxanne,
that's so meaningful.
I'm sorry, Roxana.
Roxana, I'm sorry. Yeah, Roxana, thank you so much for that email, and thank you for what you're doing in Appalachia. That holds a special place in my heart. I have family that live up in that part of the world, and when I worked in Nashville, Tennessee, we did a number of trips with youth groups up to Eastern Kentucky to help out in a town called Manchester, and there's a real need up there for Jesus' hands and feet, for people to love those people and to help. And so thank you for what you're doing up there. Thank you for that work that you're putting in. That's awesome.
A lot of good people. I know a lot of people that work at the Advent Health Manchester.
Yep.
And through the years, and there's been a lot of good people up there. But you're right. There's a lot of need.
Sometimes we think we have to leave the United States to find crippling poverty. And it is here in the States. There are people that are really stuck in a cycle of poverty that they just have no idea how to get out of, not for lack of wanting to, just not equipped.
Yeah.
They don't know how. It's hard when you're raised in a certain environment to imagine something else and to be able to push past that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Roxana, the last thing I wanted to say was, being that you're a native, I'm hoping that maybe there's still a few connective strings that still tie you to the area, and that if you happen to get here, please stop by, even if it's a weekday. Go to the website, grab my email, and let me know you're coming, and we'll go to lunch and we'll talk podcast.
I'm glad you put that important asterisk in there, because occasionally we'll have people just drop in, and we love that. We love it. Drop in. What makes us feel bad is when we're out at a hospital or on a business event or something like that, and you came in and wanted to see us, and we're like, oh, we would have loved to see you, but we're out doing other things at that moment. So send an email if you're going to drop by. We'd love having people drop in and see us. So
absolutely. And sometimes even when you plan it, it's hard to connect, right, Aaron? Yeah. We'll just leave it there, okay? Anyway, all right. So if we had,
I saw Erin when she was here.
oh man, if we had a voicemail, what does that mean?
I'm going to guess it means Carolina Dave made an appearance.
Yeah, he sure did. So here we go. Here's our voicemail from Carolina Dave.
Hello, Randy, and to the rest of the podcast crew. Hope you folks are doing well. I just wanted to call in and leave one or two comments about this last week's message. First of all, the children's choir, especially Levi's Soul, that was really awesome. There needs to be a children's choir in heaven, I do believe. Anyway, the message itself was so very moving to me. I just wanted to let you all know I really appreciated it. It was very, very much needed, and I want to thank Ken for preaching it. Something we need to think about more often. Anyhow, praying that you guys are doing well, along with the rest of the whole church, the whole life church family. And this is Carolina Days signing off until next week.
Until next week. Oh, that must mean there's more ahead. Thanks, Dave, for calling in.
Well, we know there's going to be more ahead after what was planned for this week. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and you know, I don't want to remind you again, but just like you can send me a text on this one. Just like thumbs up or thumbs down, Carolina Dave, on the theme song, because we still didn't get your full reaction.
He's a thumbs down.
Oh, I think Ken's wrong. Like I said before.
So far, we have no proof.
I know you both to be honest and upstanding Christian men, so I assume there's some kind of barrier to communication at this point. So we'll just.
I'm trying to remember if I actually talked to him about this and whether he did like it or not.
It's just that voicemail just happened to cut off at the wrong time.
It was just so odd. It really was odd. It was.
Yeah.
Some might say it was providential.
I mean, technology, when it works, it's great, right? Okay, so Melanie is going to read a text that we got from our number one fan. So, Melanie, take it away.
All right, this is... Hold on a second here. I think this is... Oh, got it. I was scrolling through, didn't realize we had multiple.
It was on the bottom, sorry.
Okay, here we go. All right, text message from Mariana. Hi, guys. First of all, what an amazing sermon. As a healthcare professional, I know that people often don't allow themselves the opportunity and the gift of grief. It is a necessary tool in our emotional health, and I appreciate this sermon so much. It gives people permission to lament and feel the sorrow without shame. My question is actually unrelated to this, but rather related to the timeline for Holy Week you drew at the beginning of the sermon. I've always questioned the timeline that the church uses for Jesus' death and resurrection. In Matthew 12:40, Jesus said, "For as Jonah was in the belly of the great fish for 3 days and 3 nights, so will the Son of Man be in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights." So, if we follow his words literally, it doesn't make sense that he died Friday night and by Sunday morning he had already resurrected. That's barely 24 hours total. Do you believe that he didn't really mean it literally, or was it not 24-hour days? I have another theory. All 4 Gospels mention the crucifixion happening on the preparation day, which we obviously know is the day before the Sabbath, Friday. However, I believe this Sabbath may not be the 7th day of the week, but rather one of the holy Sabbaths as described in Leviticus 23, 2-4. This would have fallen on a Wednesday, perhaps, and when you count 3 full days, the resurrection happens on the evening of Saturday to Sunday when Jesus' body is no longer found. To me, this makes much more sense than Jesus dying on Friday night and resurrecting on Sunday morning. I understand that this may collapse a lot of doctrine, but unless Jesus was not literal, it makes no sense. Interested in your thoughts on this. Thank you again for all you do. Your fan, Mariana.
Wow, extra credit. That's like 6 stars now. I don't know. We have to change our rating scale here, Mariana, just to accommodate. But what do you think, Ken?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And it's one that I think leaves a lot of people scratching their heads when they kind of start thinking about it and really think it through. What Jesus said about being like Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 nights and days, so will the Son of Man be in the heart of the earth. And so I think that from my perspective, and my understanding, the way that I study the Bible, and the way I've studied some of the cultural aspects of this, my response is that in our culture, here, we tend to be very literalistic with if we say it was a day, then it was 24 hours, not 23, not 22, it was a day. And so, whereas in the time of Jesus, when the Gospels were written, they were a lot less interested in detailed, specific things. So, there's something that in that time that we would call, let me pull it back up for myself, inclusive reckoning.
Okay.
And the idea behind this is that in Jewish thought, any part of a day equaled a day. So if it was only an hour or two of a day, it was like it was a full day. So it wasn't. So Jesus dies on Friday.
Not for a calendar though, right?
But when you're talking about, when you say this happened over 3 days, if it touched any part of anything,
okay,
and the evening and the morning goes back to Genesis to symbolize a day, and so anyway, so in there, the way that I have understood it is I've researched it and looked at it and thought about it through the years, is basically when Jesus is saying it, he's being literal in his time and his sense, in the sense that he dies on Friday. He's and remember that Jewish people reckon a day from sundown to sundown. We reckon our days from midnight to 11:59, which, by the way, can be very confusing. As a teacher, one of the things you learn is to be very specific with your students. If you say it's due on midnight Monday, you are going to get half your class that will turn it in at 11:59 Sunday evening, and then the other half of the class will try to get it in sometime on Monday, before midnight on Monday. And so that can be really confusing if you're not. So I learned a long time ago when I was teaching, you have to say 11:59 p.m. Otherwise, you have people that are really confused about what you mean and when you want it. So that can be an example of how things can be a little bit confusing even in our time, in our culture. But back then, the day was reckoned from sundown to sundown. So Jesus dies before sundown on Friday, day one. He is buried and in the tomb all day Saturday, day two. The sun goes down Saturday night. That begins day three, which is Sunday. And Jesus is resurrected, it says, early in the morning of the first day. How early? We don't know. But it was early in the morning is what it says. And so that's how Jesus can be literal and say that he was dead for 3 days, where in our cultural context, we're like, oh, come on, no, you really weren't. It was less than a day it was a little over a day that you were dead. But in Jesus' time, in his context, he was
that hits.
He was saying it. Yeah.
Okay.
Melanie, do you have any additional thoughts?
Well, I think some of the scholars suggest that maybe it was kind of like a shorthand for a time period. Like, for example, the Bible talks about 40 days and 40 nights. Yeah. Was it actually 40 days and 40 nights, or did they just mean, hey, a really long time? Another place in the Bible says that Jonah was in the belly of the whale forever. And so,
really?
That's another, obviously he wasn't there forever.
Some hyperbole there.
Yeah, but I think, and it is interesting that the Synoptic Gospels present it one way and the Book of John presents it another way. I think it was important to John, at least, to have Jesus being crucified at the exact moment as the sacrificial lamb was being slaughtered, and yet the others have Jesus actually participating in the Passover meal prior to being arrested and crucified. So I think it's less about, especially in this time period, it's less about the exact details of literal moments and more about emphasizing the significance of the meaning of the events.
That's frustrating, though.
It's frustrating for those of us who are in a different time, who have different expectations.
One of the other things, Marianne, you should also be aware is that when you referenced the preparation day, and in Mark it does say it says the preparation day. One of the things to understand from the Greek word that's used there for preparation day, it really is only used for Friday. It's so synonymous with Friday that's how many translations will, like the New Living Translation doesn't say on the preparation day, it says on Friday this happened, because that word is so ubiquitous for being Friday, not Wednesday, not a day before a holiday. Because what Marianne is correct about is that there were Sabbaths that weren't on the seventh day. There were Jewish holidays that were called Sabbaths, and they were distinct and separate from the Sabbath day. In Adventism, we like to say uppercase S and then lowercase S's. So these were lowercase Sabbaths, were these Jewish festivals and commemorations that God hands out that we see in Leviticus and Deuteronomy.
But that gives them some weight, right? That's why they referenced them as Sabbaths.
Well, because they were holy days.
Yeah.
They were days of cessation from activity.
That's better. Yeah. I got you.
Which is what the word Sabbath means. It means to stop or cease.
So, firstly, let me just say this. I love that you're thinking deeply about this, Mariana. And when we get to heaven, if it turns out that I'm wrong on this, I will make sure that I come and pick a special fruit from the tree of life for you.
Pretty sure you're not going to be there if you don't get this right, Ken.
Wow. Perhaps we need to go back to our values, Melanie, that inspiration means this is where conversations begin, not end. But okay. I have a church staff that you might fit into really well. That's anyway. But in all seriousness, if you're right, I don't know that for me that this is one of those things that I think it's one of these things that's really fun and interesting to think about and to ask yourself why. Why does the Bible say it this way? Why doesn't it do it another way? And yet I think it's also, for me, a really good reminder that the Bible wasn't written directly to me. It was written for me. It was written for my use, but it wasn't written to me. It wasn't written as in, oh, Ken, you're going to understand all the ways that we spoke and the ways that our culture worked. And so that's one of the things I think we have to really be thoughtful and as we approach the Bible. And this is what I see Mariana doing. She's digging in and trying to understand, go, hey, what's going on here and what's going on there and why is this and why is that? And I love that because you really do need to do that. And I think that we should ask these kind of questions because usually buried in there is a greater and better understanding of the Bible when we start to really dig in and get into it.
Well, even if there's not you're guessing if you're saying, well, maybe this is, it doesn't have to be 40, but who knows why for sure, things like that. I think it also brings a little bit of that realization, like you just talked about. It's not written exactly for me, but also there's more stuff in it than I was understanding before, and at least it gives it context. And so the next time you bump into something like this, I feel like you're a little bit more prepared to not maybe get the whole answer that we're expecting because ChatGPT can't answer it for us. Yeah,
and if you look up, there's other examples like in the book of Esther. In the book of Esther, Esther asks them to fast for 3 days and 3 nights, but then a couple verses later, she's going into the king. Earlier than you would think she would, if depending on the timing of things. So this isn't the only place where that happens. And again, it's just one of the ways that modern culture can be. I think one of the things you have to remember is like in our culture, we have, right now, I have a watch on my wrist that, can tell me what my heart rate is and how I slept last night. They did not have precise ways of telling time in the same to every. Let me put this: the common person didn't have precise ways of telling the time the way that you and I do. So, it was like around the third hour, and so that's one of the things that we're a lot more obsessed with time because we have the capability of measuring it so much easier than they did back then.
All good things to think of, which sometimes don't immediately jump out at you as obvious, not because you're not informed or you're not smart. It's just something you haven't thought of before.
I had somebody come up to me after church this week and ask me a question that I was like, that is phenomenal. That is such a smart question that I've never thought about, and I can give you my snap idea, but it's probably wrong because it's a deep question. And that's what I love about the Bible. When you go and look in the Bible, there is a never-ending list of things that you can learn and grow and find that you've read the Bible multiple times, and you're like, I never saw it that way before.
Yeah.
Well, and there's so many different layers when you're talking about how it came together, how it was written, how it was translated, how it was, contextually situated. There's so many different pieces of it that you can pick up and turn over and look at. And so when we run into stuff like this, it makes for a really interesting conversation, which I think is the point.
Well, and once you know about some of those, the context of so much of it, like I think it was Staff Retreat 2 years ago when I forget what movie we were watching, and you're like, oh man, that's, what about that? You know about this? And I'm like, what? That doesn't even sound like do we even know about the Bible? Like we had people, deciding what was going to go here and what was going to go there. And it's a little scary if you don't know, when you first find out what you don't know.
Well, and there are also, I had a conversation with somebody that I know a few days ago, and he had asked a particular question, had kind of just put her, I think he meant for it to be more of a rhetorical question, but, I gave him kind of some different scenarios to consider, and it really bothered him. He wasn't appreciative of that. He was like, nope, I don't want to look at any of the different kinds of biblical criticisms. I don't want to look at any of the scholarly stuff on it. I just want to read the words on the page and go with that. And,
Melanie, but I came back later and was willing to
No, so but I do understand that sometimes, when you run into things that don't add up, or they don't reconcile, sometimes it can be a little unnerving. But I think that's a good opportunity to be like, okay, just take a deep breath. It's really okay. It's really okay that it doesn't reconcile, because that doesn't mean that the essence of it is wrong.
Yeah.
It just means it's recorded differently.
Though.
Sure.
Another lesson to learn is never ask Melanie a question that you think is rhetorical, because
Ken has learned the hard way.
It may or may not be.
It may not be. Well, and it was funny. Joy FM, they went to Chosen Con a couple of weeks ago.
Chosen Con. That's so awesome.
The Chosen Con, right? Like so they've been doing. If you listen to the morning cruise. The Carmen, who is the Carmen of the morning show, her mom, who they call Mohair, is a huge Chosen fan, and so they let her come on the trip and prep all the questions. She hand wrote 11 pages of questions.
Oh my!
Wow.
Deep dives into everything. And so in the morning they've been playing these snippets, and this morning they played. And this is Emily's favorite jam in the morning on the way to school, so it's always on in the truck. And they interviewed Dallas, and then the actor, can't think of his name, that plays Matthew this morning. And Dallas is like, we still have people come up to us and say, I like what you're doing, but I haven't watched a moment of it myself. I just wanted to come and meet you, to to get to know you.
What?
Because I don't want to put anything in my brain about the Bible that could be something that's not actually of the Bible, and it's from someone else's. What do we call? I love what you call it, creative.
Holy imagination.
Holy imagination, right? And and he's like, look, I get it. It's a big responsibility, but also,
never listen to another sermon in your life.
Yeah, right.
I'm not kidding. Like, it's an awesome responsibility to preach, because you are interpreting the Bible. You're giving your thoughts on what the Bible is saying. And there are people, and I know some people say, yeah, that's why I'm very careful who I listen to. Well, I'm going to guarantee you that no matter who you've listened to, that put something in there that probably wasn't right. Even the best intention, the best research people have, because I can think back over the years, there are things that I would not preach that I preached 5 or 10 years ago. That I've grown in my understanding of what I hear God saying through the scripture and what's going on. And that doesn't mean that I was trying to be dishonest or I wasn't preaching from a good place 5 or 10 years ago. It means that we all grow.
Yeah.
And so my encouragement is when I think if you're watching The Chosen and acting like that, is that somebody somehow was able to go back in the past and film Jesus' life. Well, then, yeah, you don't don't approach it that way. But if you approach it that's an interesting take on this scripture, let that inspire me to dig deeper and to understand and to think, I don't agree with the way that they portrayed that. I don't think that's how that happened. There are several places in The Chosen where I've thought, I don't think I agree with the way they did that. And yet at the same time, what it did is it provoked me to think deeper about that and think, well, what do I really think here? I disagree with that, but what do I really think happened? And so I come to another oh, that's really cool. I never thought about that or this. And so my encouragement is, I think things like The Chosen, I just think watch them, use your discernment, check the Bible. But there's also so many times where I've watched The Chosen, I've thought, I'd never thought about that, but they're right. Yeah. That's exactly what I think happened there. And I had never thought about that, the nuance that Jonathan Rummy puts into Jesus's facial expressions and the way that he goes about saying certain things. I always picture Jesus with a different expression, but man, I could see that. I could see Jesus doing it that way. And then I just love some of the things that they weave in, the cultural context and understanding. So anyway, love The Chosen. Big fan.
Plus, if you're reading the Bible in English or any other language, you're already reading an interpretation.
Yeah.
And you're reading an interpretation of someone's interpretation of events. So I think it's important. I love the text. I have all the commentaries and all the things, and I've
go into
studied
Melanie's
all this
office.
stuff.
It's hard to squeeze in past all the bookcases.
But I think it's important for us to not worship the text. I think it's important to worship the God that the text talks about, because if we elevate the text to such a level that it cannot have any discrepancy whatsoever, that's going to be really disillusioning.
Yeah.
But if you recognize, hey, you know what, this is a living document that that we can interact with.
Yeah.
Then that's kind of a different approach.
Well, and it's kind of like a different translation, if you will. Again, they're going through the pieces and the parts. And of course, they're answering things because visually you have to account for things that aren't written on paper, but you can assume if all 12 were there, then all 12 were there. Well, what kind of day is this person having? And coming up with the storylines of things that could happen that you can resonate. Now, And I don't believe humanity has changed so much that they didn't have a lot of the same daily problems that we did. And I heard the person this morning, it was the actor that plays Matthew, and he went to UF. He's flow grown, and his degree was in numbers, accounting of some business management, accounting, and he ends up playing this numbers guy, right? And he said, when I read the part, he's like, I was like the Holy Spirit, like, this is you. This is your part. They cast someone else, and he sent his Paris Patel. Thank you, Ken. And they passed him over. He knew one of the assistant casting directors, and she's like, yeah, Dallas loved you. But he did his thing over a Zoom, and it froze up. And so he's like, man, there's no way I'm going to get this. I don't think she's right. Well, she kind of wasn't right because they put somebody else in the role. And then afterwards, when they reshot and redid the early parts, and when they saw I apparently looked again at his tape from Zoom and cast him, and he's like, man, this just feels like God has led my life all the way from back in college to prepare for this role. And then for those of us who have kids with special needs, how cool is it that you can identify with someone who, may not have had, autism or be on the spectrum like they talked about. And he talked about some of the possible disorders they've talked about that Matthew could have. But making things in any way, like you read a book about the Bible, and then there's, they're telling you a story. And how cool is it that the characters are so real and relatable in so many ways. So I think I'm with Ken. I'm a big fan of The Chosen. So now that we need to hit Dallas for a check, I think. So
I think we're going on a staff field trip to Chosen Con.
I was just going to tell him thank you for letting us show his videos here in the church.
Yeah.
That's it.
And can I just say that's last one thing that I have really appreciated about Dallas and the Chosen is they are so open-handed with the use of what they've created. There are a lot of people that I reached out about using some clips several years ago, and Dallas just responded, or his team responded back. It's like, hey, as long as you just tell everybody where you got it from, go for it. Use what you want. And not asking for money, not asking for and I was just, didn't
he do a promo video for you as well?
He did. Yeah. That's true. Yeah. When I was up at Madison Campus Church during COVID, we wanted to use a clip, and I reached out, and he was like, yeah, and I'd be happy to. And I said, well, is there a chance you'd be willing to shoot a video clip that we could show? And he said, sure. And he did, and mentioned the church, mentioned my name. I mean, he was I was impressed. I mean, he'd actually done some research on our church. So, I mean, it just, what a really genuinely nice person. And I was really impressed.
So someone else here has a connection to.
I met him once, Matthew Paris Patel.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Where at?
So you're best friends then?
I didn't realize we were in the presence of greatness.
Wow. I know.
I took a picture of him because I spoke with him and I was embarrassed to ask for a picture. So I just took him.
Oh, you just took a picture of him through the window?
Right.
Yeah,
Lucas,
that's not more
AI.
creepy.
Just put yourself right there next to him. It'll be fine.
This was in Burbank, California, I think 2 years ago. I was working for Hope Channel at the time, and then we were in a premiere of a project that we subscribed. And then he was there. He was one of the. He was also participating. So.
Oh, that's cool.
That was
very cool.
That was right after you started here.
Yes.
Because you started, and then you left for a long weekend to be out in Burbank. That's right.
So if you can reach out to your buddy and ask him to come, do Easter with us next year, that would be great.
He'd be like, was it you that was taking a picture of me?
No, I have to tell you, you're the second person on our staff that has, a close relationship with the celebrity. And
yep.
I don't know if I'm allowed to reveal it, so I won't. But I had one of our staff members that I nearly passed out. We were talking about I was talking with somebody in our office about this particular celebrity, and the staff member pops their head and goes, "Oh yeah, I grew up with them."
Wow.
They in some extracurricular activities, and we still are in touch. And I just spoke with this celebrity's mother last week about some stuff and blah, blah, blah.
Do we get to know the celebrity at least?
Well, you know what? You can start talking to all the staff and seeing which one, which one. I'll tell you guys off the air, but I don't know if I'm allowed to say it out loud.
Oh, okay.
She didn't tell me I couldn't, but.
We know it's a she.
I was doing so good up to that point.
I know
we know it's not Melanie.
I guess it's good we're not the typical church with only one female on staff.
Oh, shucks.
Oh, man.
So if you want to see the great picture that Lucas got of Paris through the window, join the Slack channel, and that'll be up in the Slack channel later this
week. And you can reach out to our staff and see which one's willing to admit to
having the celebrity connection. I like it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we better get to it because we haven't started actually talking about the message yet. The first thing that popped off, and it was the opening, but the disciples having a whiplash week.
Yeah.
And as much garbage as we tend to pile on the disciples about, we're with him for, every day for years, and you didn't understand this, and you totally missed that, and man, that's just, I think if I'd have been there, I think I could have done a better job. I would have known better. But you went through the week each day of their emotional roller coaster, starting with man, we are at the top on Palm Sunday. And man, there was a couple little hills, but then after that, it's wow, is this drop ever going to stop?
Yeah. The older I get, the more I realize how I would have been absolutely doing exactly what they did. I would have been booking it out of the Garden of Gethsemane. I would have gone to sleep. I would have done all those things. I'm not proud of it. I wish I'd like to tell you, hopefully I'm growing my character to where I wouldn't. But honestly, I mean, it's so easy now. You know what's coming in the story. We know. They didn't. They had no. It was just another Passover. It was another one, but it was a better one because this time Jesus had, Palm Sunday had happened. He was being called the Messiah by the people of Jerusalem, and that meant that he was probably going to become king, and then he was going to, in their prophetic understanding, he was going to come and he was going to overthrow the Romans, and then he shows his authority in the temple by changing up the things by casting over the tables. And the religious rulers were probably upset about it, but maybe they'll get over it. And I wonder what kind of political damage Jesus might have done. But then you go back to Wednesday and then it's Thursday and Jesus says, get the lamb. We're going to have this. I mean, it's like, you think about how we look forward to Christmas and you're like thinking, okay, Christmas is, it's today and we're going to celebrate and it's going to be great. We're going to be all together as a group and it's going to be so good. And then Jesus kind of has this bummer moment but then in the upper room, there's also this like specialness about how he washes everybody's feet. And that's like mind blowing for all of them. Like that doesn't happen. Like one of the things that you have to understand about washing feet is like, that was really the lowest of the low's job. It was a servant, it was a slave, it was somebody with no status. In the Roman Empire, women did not have a whole lot of rights, but one of the rights that they did have was to not have to wash their husband's feet. That was one of their rights. They did not have to do that. And so that just tells you what a lowly position this was. And Jesus takes it on. It's like mind blowing. And so their head is there. They're thinking about that, like how embarrassing that we let him do that. And yet how embarrassing would it have been if I had done that. And so they're having to wrap their mind around that. And then Jesus goes into this whole weird thing with, this is my, this bread is my body broken for you. Eat my body and you're, this must be one of his really esoteric rants. I don't know. Maybe we'll understand. Maybe we'll get him later and ask him about it. But man, it's been a long week. It's been a long day. And now we go out to the Garden of Gethsemane and Jesus seems to be all upset about something, but I don't know. And he takes his three favorites on a little further and tells them to be praying. And they're like, yeah, it's been a long day, Jesus. I mean, it's been a long day. And they go to sleep. And understandably so. And then can you just imagine, just imagine being physically exhausted. I got to tell you, after this week, last week was a really emotionally and physically draining week for me. And Sunday, I woke up, had the opportunity to help Family Promise at our church break down after a wonderful week of having them here. But it was at 6:45 in the morning, and my alarm went off at 6, and I didn't know where I was, who I was, what was going on. And I'm like, and it's time to get up. And so when I think about that, and I think about what Jesus' disciples must have been like being woken up, and then all these people with clubs and swords are there to arrest Jesus, and you're confused, and then they run off. I get it. I get it. Like, Jesus, let's not forget, Jesus doesn't need anybody to take care of him. He walked through a crowd of people that were trying to push him off a cliff, so he can walk away from this. And I don't know that I have those skills, so I'm going to run. I'm going to head out, And then to see him being put on trial, to see him being escorted to the place where common criminals are executed, I cannot begin to imagine what that would have been like for those disciples. And so, a little bit of a roller coaster of a week.
I always thought that, they had the high on Sunday. And then I know that I'm sure they were probably a little afraid, like you said, of the religious leaders, like, well, maybe they won't be so upset that he threw everybody out of the temple and whatever. But I also thought on the other hand, like, hey, now things are cooking, like, hey, he came in as a king and now he's laying down the law. he's making sure that they know their place and that we know our place. And so maybe there was still, and then, you get to Wednesday. Of course, I don't think the rest of them knew what Judas was up to on Wednesday. So maybe they were feeling pretty good until, like you said, I think on Thursday when it's like, what is he talking about? This is not like, how come we're not drawing up battle plans, or we're not ready to, all right, guys, now we, the right hand, left hand, we talked about that. All right, now we're ready to put together the cabinet. We're ready to put together, the plan for the takeover. And as none of that happens, it's always made me think when they get to Saturday or even Friday night, like, where did we go wrong? Like, what did we not get about all this? I thought we were the week started off so good. So to hear you kind of recap that in a different way than I've heard before really was like, wow, they really, it's like, it's easy to feel a lot of sympathy for them, that we don't always give them credit for the situation that they were in and what they knew and what they understood. And this is one where you're like, wow, man, this all must have felt really good to really bad pretty fast. And then you said the Jewish practice. Jesus wasn't in the tomb long enough to be considered proven dead. How long was enough to satisfy that?
Lazarus
Really?
was, yeah.
That was what, 5 days?
4 days.
4 days?
You're, and I'm talking off the top of my head. I've studied this a couple times, but I'm going to try to make sure that I'm accurate. But my understanding is that there is basically that culturally there is an understanding in some Jewish thought that the soul could kind of wander around for 3 days and return to the body if it was needing to come back alive. But after 3 days, the soul couldn't return to the body, and the body was definitely dead by the time 3 full days, or by the time the 4th day rolled around.
So not tied to breathing, a pulse, anything like we would think.
It was obviously tied to a little bit of that, but keep in mind you didn't have brain scan instruments to see if there was brain activity. And even today in some countries that have less advanced technology, somebody will be declared dead and then, surprisingly sit up in their coffin and be like, hey, no, I'm,
dead ringer.
Yeah, because your pulse can become super weak. You still have your heart maybe is still beating very slowly, but it becomes very weak and it isn't detected, and your breathing isn't detected. And so for them, it was like 3 days. And after 3 days, usually the body is beginning to decompose. And that's the other aspect of this. So,
okay. That makes sense. Yeah, I just never heard that before. That made me curious. You said experiencing grief and asking God why, or why not, or where are you, or not seemingly having enough faith when you don't see or hear God is regarded often as being not faithful. And that is so spot on, but I hadn't really thought of it, because that seems like the consensus. It's just like, well, yeah, but you should probably have a little more faith. Have you prayed enough about this?
You need to trust in God.
That one. Yeah, you need to trust in God. That is, I was really glad that you said that, because I know that just personally, I felt that way many, many times in my life, where you're just dismissed almost, like, well, you can come back when you go through and do the things you're supposed to do, that you really know you're supposed to do this, and don't try to take the easy way out and just like, what are you asking me for?
A good Christian wouldn't ask those questions.
Yeah. And I just hope anyone that has been thinking, and Jay, we haven't heard from you for a while. I hope you're still listening. And, for someone who's been in one of those situations and you've felt that, because that is such a real and heavy feeling when you're in that place. And then if you ever get that response, it's really, really hard to think about that and move yourself to the next point, whatever that is, if you don't know.
Well, when you are suffering, when you are really suffering, the assurances that you have claimed all your life can feel like a very narrow ledge that you're trying to dig your fingernails into as you're sliding. And to have somebody say you're not hanging on to that ledge well enough is painful. What you need from that person is not for them to kick the fingers that you're holding onto that ledge. You need them to put a hand down and help support you.
Yeah.
And that doesn't look like saying you don't have enough faith, you don't have enough trust. It's like saying, hey, this doesn't make sense. And can we just be honest? If you think that everything that happens to human beings in life makes sense, I just got to question what kind of life you're living. Yeah. Like, I just do. There are things that happen that just absolutely don't make sense. They just don't. And God understands. God's big enough for that. God's big enough to be questioned. And there's such a big difference between trying to hold on to the ledge and just letting go. And lament is the act of trying to hold on to the ledge while it feels like you're not going to be able to.
Yeah.
And so, some people are like, well, I don't think it's right to complain about God. There's a difference between these two things. Lament is saying, God, I don't understand. I want to understand. I want you to speak. I want to be in relationship with you. I want to have this connection. But Lord, the thing that's happened to me right now is very difficult for me to understand how you could allow that to happen. And you can go ahead and say, well, God didn't bring that on you. But that doesn't change that for many of us in the Christian faith, we believe God is sovereign. We believe that nothing can happen to us without his permission. And if that's the case,
yeah,
then why did you grant permission? Why didn't you grant permission over here on this person, but with me, you're allowing it? Why? And it's part of the process of being in relationship to ask those kind of questions. If I'm very close to somebody, like in my marriage with Rochelle, if I feel hurt, I feel like she could have prevented something, the right thing for me to do is to go and say, hey, why?
Yeah.
Help me understand what's going on. Can we please change something here? Can this happen? Can that happen? And we see that repeatedly throughout the Bible. We see it over and over again. I think that the biblical authors were a lot more comfortable with lament and questioning God than maybe some of us today are, because they did it. It happened all the way throughout the Bible.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned Job in that, because when people say, yeah, you shouldn't complain about God, or you shouldn't complain to God, I mean, Job took it, I'd say, pretty close to the edge as far as maybe you can go before. I don't know what the consequences would be, but I mean, he definitely brought everything to God, all of his frustrations, and of course, all of the bad things that had happened. And we look at it that way, but I don't think often enough we define lament. And I this is kind of a word salad of what you talked about, the words you used for lament, but I thought it made a nice couple of sentences. So let me know if I'm off anywhere here. Lament is a passionate expression of grief, sorrow, or regret. It's a structured, purposeful way of processing pain. It is the transition between what happened and the not yet. And it's the prayer we pray while we wait for the world to be made right. And nice. I thought, if and it's hard. Words are words, but if you really stop and think about that, and you think about how God interacted with Job in that story in the Bible, that's a nice idea of something that you can, at least while you're hanging on the edge, the now and the not, between what happened and the not yet, and the prayer we pray for the world, where we wait for the world to be made right. I just really thought those put together in something that's memorable, that seems plausible, sometimes is enough, because it's more than I can think of, because I can't think of anything good. But if I think about, wow, this is where I'm at, maybe I'm going to be okay. Maybe I'm going to come through the other side, even though I don't hear the responses to my prayers. And then realizing that the disciples knew Jesus as a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And, Jesus, you said, he lamented on Palm Sunday, raising Lazarus, even though he knew, and this is someone who's experienced everything we experience. And he even had the ability, the ability to know what was coming and to still feel that. I thought that also was just a really fun look at Jesus. Not a fun look at Jesus, but a different look at Jesus as someone who, because I think we forget that he really did understand what we go through. And so if he understood it then, he still understands it now. And I think that was a comfort. And I don't know if I've ever heard it exactly said that way. And then, of course, my God, why have you forsaken me? Which is like, oof, that one always hits right to the core.
Yeah. And for me, Jesus quoting Psalm 22, the very beginning of it, and the meaningful part for me is that I don't want Jesus to feel abandoned by God, but for me, it is a very meaningful thing to think that when I feel abandoned by God, and there have been times, that Jesus understands what that feels like. The agony, the hurt, the pain, the suffering, and probably in ways that I actually don't understand. And so truly that is a God that loves me and cares for me, even when I don't feel it. And I just want to, just again, encourage people, like, I don't know what kind of place you grew up, but I told you, I confess that I've never preached a sermon on lament before. And and what I didn't really say there, but it's also true, I don't ever remember hearing a sermon on lament in growing up. I don't. I've heard it discussed. I've heard about it talked. I've read about little snippets here and there, but I don't really ever remember. And so for any of my pastors that growing up, if I'm misrepresenting you, I do apologize, but I don't remember ever hearing a sermon on lament. But what I do remember being told is that when bad things happen, I need to make sense of it. I need to not blame God, and I need to go ahead and give the devil the blame for it. And I need to go ahead and have faith, have hope, the blessed hope. And then I need to go ahead and if I do weep, I don't weep as those without hope. And I go ahead and, buckle down and do what needs to be done. And honestly, the less crying you could do, the better for all of us, really, because it's really, really uncomfortable being around somebody who's crying. So if you could kind of,
that'd be great.
That's not really good. I know I was the child that would cry in class all the time. I was that kid. I was like, the teacher's like, why did you do that? And I didn't mean to do it. And I don't remember that being like a positive experience where the teacher and classmates were like, wow, you're a sensitive child. That's a real superpower for you. Good for you. Way to go ahead and let that, I remember feeling a lot of embarrassment and shame over it and being told, why don't you just go to the bathroom and, deal with that there. And so what happens is I think that we have, I think that is a product of a culture that doesn't really understand how to grieve and doesn't understand the health benefits of grieving. And so it's something that I'm having to figure out how to, and if you ask Kyle and Eric, I think they would tell you very straightforwardly that their dad isn't the most comfortable with them being upset. And it's not something I'm proud of. I want to be that guy. I know, but that's just not how I was raised, and it's not what I grew up with. And And so I hope that my kids are able to do a little bit better than I did at raising kids that are able to express the full range of emotion and understand the time and the place for those things. There's times where you do have to buckle down. Last week I was given the tremendous privilege of being at Forest Lake Academy and providing pastoral support to the students and staff there. And it was a time where I kind of needed to put my feelings on the back burner and be present for those that are going through some things. But if I'm going to be very straightforward with you, I had some really big feelings. I did not know Eduardo or his family. I think I may have met him a couple times. This is the young man who passed away, who was a student at Forest Lake Academy and drowned. And I did not know him. But when it happened, I got some very, very, very big feelings of my own, to the point that my family said, "What's going on with you? Like what? Why are you getting these big feelings?" And without going into deep detail, that's what I spent. I went and visited my counselor on Monday and spent an entire session walking through the feelings that I was having and what could be triggering it, why the big reaction on this. And, for me, there's some childhood issues around death. One of my best friends was what we thought was terminally ill with leukemia from the time I was in kindergarten through 5th grade. And I'm happy to say that he's still alive and well, but we, as second graders, talked about what to do if he died, because it was so possible and he was in the hospital and that sort of thing. And so for me, one of the things I've realized is I've never really processed through those feelings. And from some of the other people that were important in my life that have passed away, I've never really sat down and sat in it. I've just kind of pushed it to the back of my head and said, I'm just going to deal with it. I'm going to move on. And so for me, this sermon that I preached was pretty personal. It was pretty personal as I'm trying to figure out what lament looks like in my life and how do I practice that in a way that's authentic, and in ways that I'm not really sure about. That I'm explaining. I imagine that if I preach this sermon 5 or 10 years from now, it'll look a lot different than it does right now.
Yeah.
Because I'm at the very beginning of my journey on this one.
Well, and I think we heard that, from Carolina Dave, we heard that from Roxana, that, people were definitely touched in tears on the way to work. So I think that, like you said, I think there's a reason why we don't do it, but I think it's as a general practice of messages or sermons preached about the topic, but also at our own peril for not doing it or not like you said, not sitting in it a little bit and figuring out.
The health implications are real.
Yeah.
I mean, they are very, very real, emotionally and physically, for not, tears are a physical release. They literally physically release stress and hurt. And when we don't allow ourselves to feel the full range that we're feeling, when we repress it, it's not healthy. And can we just stop for a second? I want to say this because it's important to me. We all are have different psychology. Some of us, like, a lot of horrible things can happen and you're like, it's bad. I don't like it, but I'll walk through it and I'll be okay. And I don't really need to cry over this. I don't feel that. And then there's others of us who are very, very sensitive. But as a society has told us, you need to bottle it up and you need to not do that. And that's what I want to say, because there's some people that will hear this and be like, well, I don't really feel crying. I don't really feel like crying. Am I something wrong with me? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Maybe that's just the way God built you. I would encourage you just to talk to a good mental health counselor just to see if everything is the way it should be. Just the same way I would tell you if you didn't respond to, if you pounded your thumb with a hammer and you didn't flinch, I'd say, well, did you feel that? And if you didn't feel it, maybe that's the way your body was designed, but it might also be a good idea to go see a doctor and see if your body is reacting the way it should be. And I think that's the thing to think about here is that we all experience physical pain in different ways, and we have different pain tolerances. And the same thing is true psychologically. And so what we need to do is be very there for people with whatever they're at and whatever they need. And that is just, again, one of the harder things for me, because I'm a problem solver and I want you to feel good. I don't want you to be sad. I want you to get better. And so for me, one of the hard things in life is to sit and just not try to solve the problem, but just be there, to be a listening ear. And it's one of the things that I appreciate about what my counselor did for me this week. I think I went on about a 40-minute verbal vomit. And he just was there with me, and it was what I needed. I needed him. I didn't need him to fix it. I didn't need him to give me ideas about when we got to a certain point. I was like, okay, so how do I do this, this, and this? But he was there with me, and I just needed him to listen and to be sitting there, and it felt so good. And so that's one of the things I have to remind myself when I sit with people, is that just being there with them, not reprimanding them for feeling their feelings, not for saying, hey, have a little bit more faith, but not even saying, hey, you probably should cry right now. But just to say, hey, what is it that you want to talk about? How can I be here with you? That's what people really need.
Man, lots to think about. And hopefully if there's something that, if you kind of are feeling that same way, maybe a mental health professional can give you some relief and some answers, or just that listening ear that can make such a difference.
I think that one of the things to understand about a good mental health practitioner is that they're not going to give you answers. They're going to help you find your answers. And I think that's a really important aspect of things, that generally what they'll do is they'll help you work through it so that you can find the answers, because every human being is unique. And what works for Randy doesn't necessarily work for Ken. And I say, I just need to be quiet, but maybe Randy actually needs me to say, well, here's some ideas, here's some things.
Well, and I think that's why it's important to understand the purpose of lament. Lament is not so that you can get to the end of it and put a bow on it and be done with it. Lament is really the expression of the grief that you're feeling. And grief really doesn't go away. You make peace with it. You learn how to live with it. You learn how to have it as a shadow that follows you around. But there is a process to becoming accustomed to living with the grief. And an important part of that process is lament. And like Ken was saying earlier, I think especially in our society, we're so far removed. When someone we love dies, we don't care for their bodies. We don't physically bury them. We have to contract those things out to other people. So and in some ways, we're really robbed of some of the ways that people have been able to process their grief, over millennia. And I also think that because this is such a deficit in our society, this is actually something that we have to offer, society as people who have a long history and a long example of biblical processing of grief through lament. That is actually a gift that we have that other people need.
Wow. It's funny, you don't think about angles like that right off the bat, but the things that as you continue to be a part of it, and you're thinking about it, and you're kind of immersing yourself in this idea, and then it's like, oh yeah, that's a huge gift if you're thinking about it from that perspective, and to some, just actually saying that it's okay to even consider it, let alone if you get to the other point where it can be a gift or I'm going to get help from it. But like even just being allowed to think about it, I think is a huge gift for a lot of people that have been told, society and otherwise, and unfortunately even at church, that this really isn't a good idea. You should just buck up and move on. So, Lucas, we did have one question. Sorry for all you folks at second that tried to watch second service again, but we did get one from first.
Yeah. Question for Ken. Along with accepting the importance of lament, doubt is also important to our spiritual walk. Faith would not be needed without doubt. So acknowledging it is essential. It seems like Jesus lived in the moment and fully experienced all of our emotions. Often in our churches, we make feelings like lament and doubt a taboo, when we should allow ourselves to experience our feelings and honestly confess them to God.
True.
Ooh. That was an easy one. He took that one right off the bat. True. But what do you do to go just a little bit further? Again, this is something that so many of us grew up with, that it was taboo, and it was, I heard in my house, "Why are you crying? You want something to cry about? I'll give you something to cry about."
Wow. Our parents must be from the same generation.
Right? I think that Ken and Randy have more in common than many might know. And so that idea that crying is not, there's not really any situations where crying is really acceptable. And to that, does that start? Is that something you can get over, or something you can work through yourself? Or, do you need somebody to help you through that part? Because that rears its ugly head.
I think I think let's go ahead and open it up a little bit. Do you need somebody? Yes. As human beings, we were not made to do this alone. So everybody needs somebody. Do you need a paid professional? Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe not. But do you need somebody? Yes. We all need each other. And that's the part of Lament Hope that you also didn't miss out on, that it isn't just a singular activity where I go home and journal and cry in my room and ask questions out in a open field by myself with God. That it also can be a very corporate event where we come together and lament. And that's one of the powers of memorial services and funerals, is that we come together with shared lament of loss and a sense of community. And those things are important, because while we believe we believe in a God that raises people from the dead, and we're about to celebrate that this Easter in just a few days, we also know that until that day happens, until the resurrection, we are without that person that we care about. And it's not just human loss. A lot of us struggle when we lose things that we've found that to be identifiers in our life. When you're a hard worker and you lose your job, and suddenly everything you thought you knew about yourself and your worth is called into question. When a marriage that you have invested everything that you have in, that you have suddenly disappears, who are you? Are you worth anything? Is there anybody out there who thinks you're worth something? These are all things that cause lament. And there are also things that we need other people to walk through with us, and to not just simply to be trying to figure it out on our own. And that's where, as much as people want to use AI to be their personal counselors, that's where AI will never, ever be able to do what another human being can do. And that's look at another human being in the eye with empathy and say, yeah, I'm here with you. And I may not understand perfectly, but I'm human too. So if I don't understand, I sure can imagine. And I am here with you. And that's it's just important. So yeah, Randy, I don't think we can do lament all by ourselves. I think that there's aspects of it that we have to do on our own, but I also think that there's aspects of it that absolutely have to be done with others.
Yeah. Well, guys, thanks so much. All the feedback, it really makes what we do here on the podcast so much more fun, so much more interesting when we have your comments and your questions and your dive deeper questions that come from that. So please continue with that. This week, you guys, come on. If you're going to miss anything, don't miss Easter at WholeLife. I'm just please don't. Secondly,
can I be the one to brag on you guys?
Come for first service, right? More room to sit.
Yeah.
And I'm anticipating
also easier parking generally at the beginning.
Generally, and this year we're doing something. I mean, you got Tenebrae on Thursday, so please don't forget about that. WholeLife.church/events. All of our Sunday sunrise service on Sunday morning.
And let's just put the disclaimer out for Tenebrae. It is a celebration, or not celebration. What's the right word? It is a commemoration of the suffering that Jesus went through. And so it is a darker service. And so if you come, do be prepared for that. This isn't an Easter morning. This is a entering into the suffering with Christ. And so that's part of Tenebrae. And I know that it's easy to say, well, I think I'll stay home then. But I think to really fully appreciate the resurrection, you have to understand the suffering as well. And so I think if you want your biggest Easter experience, and hey, let's just also be honest, you may not be emotionally up for it. And if you're not, that totally understand. But if you are, I think it's a really wonderful thing to take part in and be a part of. And then Sabbath, I have watched, today was the first day where I got to see what our creative team has come up with here. And let me just tell you, I don't think I am exaggerating when I say it is going to blow your mind what they have come up with. It absolutely blew my mind. What it is, when you see it, you're going to think, did they go talk to Disney? Did they work with Pixar? What did they do? But this is all our creative team. I think, Melanie, did you write the scripts? And then we had some just very gifted church members who verbally brought those scripts to life. And then if you want to see what happened after that, be there. And I made Lucas and Randy promise me that next week they're going to do at least a few little behind the scenes things on our social media, which you will not want to miss, about what how they have brought these characters to life. It is incredible, and it is deeply spiritual. It is really beautiful. And so the music, Albert and Wycliffe and the entire team have just musically put together something very, very special. And I'm always, every time I see all this, I think, oh boy, I've got to preach during this thing. So
and Abel got us the canvas to display all of the work and all of the technology that I'm looking at, the screen that he's looking at. And I know my technology, Lucas knows his technology, but I look at the little box that is working this whole thing out and I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Nope.
Say a prayer over that thing. But I want to say a huge thank you. Like, we have just an incredible team working here at WholeLife, every single one, and just kudos to what you all have put together. This will be a super special Easter together. You do not, if you miss it, you will. It's like it's occasionally that movie that comes out that you say, I need to see this one on the big screen. And I would say this is going to be an amazing thing to watch online. It'll be fantastic. So if you're an online viewer, we're going to make sure it's fantastic for you. And if you can be in person, I think you're going to want to try to do that. It is going to be pretty incredible. And then I also want to say that we are doing something new this year that we have not done before. And I really want to invite you to be a part of it. And the Easter celebration on Sabbath is going to be full of technology, and there's going to be this just incredible lights and music and all that. And then what we're going to do is, in a way, it's going to be kind of a bit of a reversal, because Sunday morning, 7 a.m., no electronics, all acoustic. We're going to meet out on the edge of Lake Winya, right next to Advent Health University. And we are going to have a sunrise service, a very simple sunrise service together. There's going to be acoustic music. There's going to be some spoken word. There's going to be a little bit of devotional thought. There's going to be a little bit of time for reflection as we celebrate Christ's resurrection and what that means to us on Sunday morning as the sun comes up over Lake Winya. It's going to be beautiful. We're praying for good weather, and we just hope that you'll join us out there for it. You can park at Advent Health University's parking lot. They've been gracious enough to say that we can use that. What I would say is if you don't have anything that gives you problems with your movement, and you're able to, if you're able to, parking in the parking garages on King Street would be a real blessing to those who are less mobile and who could use those parking spaces at Advent Health University that are closer to the banks of Lake Winya. And so if you can park, if you're able to park in those parking garages, that would be phenomenal. And if it's not what's best for you, and then we hope that there'll be plenty of parking spaces left open for you at Advent Health University, and you can join us. But you'll want to bring your own blanket or your own chair. It is, like I said, it is a very, very simple service for our first time trying this out. We're going to see what we think, and we'd love for you just to join us. So bring your own chair, bring something to sit on, and it will be a 30-minute service, 7 to 7:30. And we'll just celebrate together. And if you want to stay longer and sit there and watch the sun come up over the lake longer than 7:30, you're absolutely welcome to do that. On the other hand, for those of you who want to start that Sunday off with that kind of experience together with your church family, celebrating what Easter really is all about, and that is Christ's resurrection, then join us out there, 7 o'clock. Just put into your GPS Advent Health University. If you don't know where that's at, just think in terms of WholeLife Church. If you're coming to WholeLife Church, you're going to be coming down Orange, and you're going to come to King Street. Instead of turning right towards WholeLife, instead of turning towards WholeLife, you'll turn the opposite direction, go down that road. It'll take a sharp right, and then you'll tease. You'll take a right, and you'll wind up at Advent Health University and right where you're supposed to be.
You dropped a pin on it, didn't you?
I think I did.
Yeah, and that's going to be in our events calendar.
Yeah, the address. Yeah, correct.
So we hope to see you out there. And again, I think it'll be just a real special time together. And hey, if 2,000 people show up, I'll realize that maybe I should have thought about some voice amplification, or we'll pray for something supernatural.
There you go. All right. Well, I mean, you now know it's Easter. Don't miss it. So, of course, if you're online, we'd love to hear from you. And so every week, if you have your questions or your comments to the podcast by probably Tuesday around noon, 2 o'clock. I usually do check right before we actually record, but don't always get a chance. So the sooner the better on Tuesday. So guys, thanks for listening, for sharing, for participating. Today was great. So thank you so much, and have a great week. Thanks for listening to This is WholeLife. If today's conversation resonated with you, we invite you to subscribe, share, and leave a review on your favorite listening platform. To join the conversation, send a text or voicemail to 407-965-1607 or email podcast@wholelife.church. To learn more about WholeLife Church, worship with us online or in person, visit our website, wholelife.church. Until next time, this is WholeLife.